Alien Girl was seconds away from being executed until a human holds her hand. He held her hand to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Will you be like them? Let me know in the comment section below. And now, the black market deck of Omega Spire carried that familiar tang of ozone mixed with the sour bite of cheap algae brew steaming from cracked vendor carts. Elias Voss moved through the press of bodies with his hood pulled low. The small vial of glowing helix DNA pressed tight against his ribs, where his own pulse seemed to answer its faint thrum. A vendor with a face like weathered hull plating leaned in close and hissed, "Double the credits or walk, archaeologist." But Elias only slid a cracked data chip across the scarred counter. Payment in sequences no one else wanted anymore. The deal closed with a curt nod, the vial now his, warm through the fabric like a secret trying to speak. He pocketed it and turned, boots scuffing through layers of grime and discarded nutrient wrappers, weaving past stalls where traders hawked everything from bootleg neural lace to jars of preserved starlight. The crowd thickened near the central plaza, a slow river of shoulders and murmured deals, and then the hollow screens flared to life overhead, massive panels blooming with light that washed the color from every face. Nova Sereth stared down from 12 meters of projected height, her expression calm while the announcer's voice rolled out, flat and official, "Charged with possession of forbidden Helian genome." The words hung in the recycled air. Around Elias, the lunch rush crowd, maybe 50,000 packed into the open deck, shifted uneasily, eyes darting to food carts or the floor, anywhere but the scaffold where she stood. Elias meant to keep walking. Black Market Rule 1 had kept him breathing this long. Never get involved. Yet his gaze snagged on the tattoo curling along her neck, the pattern pulsing in a rhythm that matched the glow in his pocket, beat for beat. Same cadence, same quiet pause between pulses. His fingers brushed the disruptor tucked inside his coat before his mind caught up, thumb already settling on the trigger like it belonged there. Click. The containment field shimmered over the scaffold, surface rippling the way water does when a stone sinks slow, then fractured into threads of violet smoke that spilled across the plaza. Nova dropped through the haze, hit the deck in a controlled roll, and came up running, bare feet silent on the metal grating. Overhead, Hylian drones snapped awake with a chorus of rising whines, search beams lancing down to carve glowing scars across the crowd. People scattered, trays clattering, someone's hot broth splashing across Elias's boots as he shoved forward. He caught her wrist mid-stride, the contact electric. "This way," he muttered, voice pitched low beneath the swelling alarms. She didn't argue, just matched his pace as they plunged into a service corridor where biotubes lined the walls like fat veins, flexing with each slow pump of nutrient sludge toward the upper levels. The green glow painted their faces in shifting shadows, and behind them the heavy tread of enforcer boots echoed closer, measured, inevitable. Nova's breath came quick but even, her free hand brushing a tube as they passed. The membrane quivered under her touch like it recognized something. "You just blew your cover for a stranger?" she asked, the words half laugh, half wonder. Elias didn't waste breath on an answer. He slapped a side panel, sparked the lock with a jolt from his multi-tool, and hauled her through into the dim hush of the Museum of Forbidden Genetics. Rows of glass cases stretched under failing light strips, each holding a fragment of something the directorate had labeled extinct. A 6-winged bird embryo curled tight in amber, a length of vine that had once overgrown cities until the roots choked the sky. Dust motes drifted lazy in the stale air. Nova slowed at a cracked plinth, drawn to the fossilized embryo suspended inside. She pressed her palm flat against the cool surface. The glass warmed beneath her skin, a soft chime rising like a held breath finally released. Faint hologlyphs unfolded in the air. Worlds connected by glowing threads, symbols of balance older than any colony Elias had ever dug through. He pulled his handheld scanner, swept the beam across the shifting patterns on her neck. The display stuttered, numbers climbing as the code rewrote itself faster than the device could log. Living, breathing. "Hylian wants this to restart their network," she whispered, eyes still on the projection. "The one that quieted whole biospheres. Just to keep everything in neat little rows." Her voice carried the weight of planets gone silent. The main doors shuddered under a heavy impact, once, twice, then blew inward on hinges screaming protest. Enforcers poured through in matte armor, scanners pinging sharp against the embryo case. Elias snatched a thumb-sized shard of crystallized memory from a nearby pedestal, the facets cool and sharp against his palm, and slipped it into his coat. He grabbed Nova's hand again. "Vents, now." They scrambled up a maintenance ladder bolted to the wall, metal rungs cold and gritty under their grip. Elias shouldered the grate above, eased it aside with a soft scrape that sounded too loud in the sudden quiet. The vent shaft yawned narrow and dark, dust thick enough to taste. Below, a janitor in faded coveralls pushed a mop in slow circles, earbuds blinking faint blue, humming some tuneless thing under his breath. He never glanced up as the enforcers fanned out, boots crunching over shattered glass, red scanner beams sweeping the displays inches from the open grate. Elias pulled Nova in after him and let the grate settle back with a muted click. Darkness folded close, warm and tight, carrying the faint scent of her skin. Something like rain on stone. Her fingers found his in the black, a light pressure that asked nothing yet. "Truth's in the genes, huh?" she breathed, the words brushing his ear like a secret. "Not bullets." He squeezed once, steady, sure, and felt the pattern on her wrist shift to match the rhythm of his own pulse. The vent carried them forward on hands and knees, heartbeats sinking in the station's hidden veins. Two strands already learning the shape of a braid neither had chosen yet. The rust freighter groaned as Elias punched the thrusters, slipping past Omega Spire's outer patrols like a shadow sliding through cracked ice. Nova sat in the co-pilot seat, knees drawn up tight, watching the station shrink to a glittering scar against the endless void. Her fingers traced idle circles on the armrest, the patterns on her skin dimming to a soft silver glow that danced with the console lights in a rhythm all its own. She tilted her head toward him, a small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth despite everything. "You always rescue people with stolen ships?" Elias glanced over, one hand steady on the yoke, the other drumming a quick beat on his thigh to shake off the adrenaline. "First time for that. Usually I just steal the samples and run like hell." He paused, then added with a weary shrug that lifted his shoulders just enough to show the exhaustion underneath. "Guess plans change when the sample looks back at you." They burned toward the restricted sector on a vector that hugged the ecliptic plane, engines humming low and steady. The kind of sound that lulled you into thinking the black outside wasn't hungry. Nova uncurled slowly, stretching her legs out until her boots nudged the base of the dashboard. She watched the stars streak by in thin white lines, her reflection faint in the viewport. "That vial you traded for, it hummed the same as me." Elias nodded without looking away from the nav plot. "Ancient helix. No match in any database I ever cracked. Figured it was junk until your neck lit up like a sync signal. Hey." He tapped a sequence into the console, adjusting course by a few degrees to skirt a debris field left from some old mining op. The ship shuddered gently, metal protesting the shift. Hours slipped by in that quiet hum, the only interruptions the occasional ping from the proximity sensors. Elias pulled a ration pack from the overhead, tore it open with his teeth, and handed half to Nova. She took it, fingers brushing his, deliberate this time, lingering just a second longer than needed. "Tastes like recycled cardboard," she said, chewing slowly. "Better than execution chow, I guess." A soft laugh escaped him, more breath than sound. "Yeah, well, menu's limited out here." He leaned back, eyes on the forward scan as the Abyss 3 vault loomed ahead. A planet-sized mausoleum orbiting a dead star only mo. 3 AU out, its surface pocked with craters that swallowed light whole, the whole thing wrapped in a faint haze of cryogenic vapor. Docking clamps locked with a dull thud that vibrated through the hull, and the airlocks cycled open to a chill that bit straight through their suits, frosting the edges of their visors. Elias checked the seal on his gloves, then hers, a quick tug to make sure. "Temperature's dropping fast. Stay close." They stepped onto the vault's outer ring, boots crunching on frost that glittered like powdered glass under the emergency strips. Gel-filled caverns stretched endless below the grated walkway, preserving the final breaths of species long gone. DNA strands drifted suspended in the viscous medium like silver ghosts, caught in slow-motion storms, catching the dim light in lazy spirals that made the whole place feel like a dream you couldn't wake from. Nova moved ahead first, her steps light but sure, boots sinking slightly into the gel floor with each stride. She paused at the edge of the nearest pool, the liquid a deep translucent blue that shifted to green where the light hit. Without a word, she dipped a fingertip in, and the gel rippled outward in perfect concentric waves. Her eyes fluttered shut, breath catching sharp as memories flooded through the contact. Vast forests screaming under orbital purges, rivers of molten glass where oceans once teemed with life, skies choked with ash as Helian's early tests silenced world after world. She pulled back with a gasp, hand pressing hard to her temple, fingers trembling. They didn't just kill them, they erased the echo. Every scream, every root pushing through soil, gone. Elias knelt beside her, cracked datapad already out and recording the resonance frequencies that pulsed from the pool in faint waves. His jaw tightened as the data scrolled, numbers climbing in patterns that matched the mural sketches he'd seen in Forbidden Archives years ago. Collective memory, wiped clean, like the pain never happened, like the balance never mattered. His voice carried a quiet anger, the kind that settled deep in the chest, and he adjusted the gain on the pad to capture every faint whisper. Nova watched him work, her hand dropping to rest on his shoulder. Steady pressure, grounding. You feel it too, the hole where it should be. A low mechanical whine echoed from the shadows, growing closer until a lone caretaker drone hovered into view, its optics flickering erratically between red and amber, half mad from centuries of isolation, chassis patched with mismatched plates scavenged from who knows where. It scanned their forged badges with a jerky tilt of its sensor array, mistaking the credentials for official inspectors. A series of beeps spilled out, almost relieved. Vault access granted. Finally, someone to check the seals. Humidity levels off by 0.7%. Unacceptable. The drone's voice cracked like old static over rusted speakers, and it trundled ahead on whining servos, leading them deeper into the cavern's heart. They followed through tunnels where the gel grew thicker, strands clustering like frozen lightning. The drone paused at a sealed bulkhead, extending a manipulator arm to interface with the lock. Light cycled green, and the door irised open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Inside waited a mural etched into the living rock of the cavern wall. The original Helix network, a living web linking 4,000 worlds in glowing threads that pulsed with stored vitality, ecosystems braided together in perfect symmetry before Helian's blades cut them one by one, leaving only scars. Nova's skin flared brighter at the sight, projecting faint bridge lights across the floor in subtle paths only Elias could follow. Bioluminescent traces blooming under her steps like breadcrumbs through the dark, guiding them closer to the mural's center. She reached out, palm hovering inches from the surface, and the threads pulsed in response, sinking to her heartbeat. This was balance, not control, life talking to life. Her gesture was gentle, almost reverent, fingers curling as if to hold something fragile that might shatter at a touch. Elias stepped up beside her, pocketing a small probe to capture the mural's data stream, the device humming softly as it drank in the ancient code. He traced one of the threads with his gloved finger, the projection warm under the fabric. 4,000 worlds, that's more than the directorate claims existed. Nova nodded, eyes distant. They rewrote the maps too, erased the connections so no one would miss them. The drone hovered nearby, running a diagnostic on a nearby panel, oblivious to the weight of what it guarded. Alarms wailed sudden and sharp through the cavern. The caretaker drone had triggered a self-destruct sequence to protect the vault's secrets, its chassis sparking wildly as internal charges armed. Intruder protocol override. 30 seconds to containment, Elias yelled, grabbing Nova's arm in a grip that brooked no argument. Run! They sprinted back through the gel, strands whipping past like frantic ghosts trying to cling, boots splashing up glowing droplets that hung in the air behind them. From orbit, a directorate cruiser logged the energy spike on their long-range screens, the duty officer leaning forward with a frown. But the signature matched old graveyard anomalies, and he waved it off with a yawn, tapping the dismiss key. Graveyard static again. Log it and forget. Nothing out there but bones. They burst into the freighter's bay just as the vault seals slammed shut with a final resounding boom that echoed through the hull. Elias slammed the launch controls, the ship lurching free with a groan of stressed metal and venting cryogas. Nova slumped against the bulkhead, chest heaving, but her pulse steadied quick under Elias's watchful eye. He pocketed a memory crystal harvested from the mural's edge, its facets warm and pulsing faintly in his grip like a second heart. "First page stolen," he said, meeting her eyes with a tired but genuine spark. She placed her hand over his on the console, the helix pattern syncing once more in perfect time. And the story's just starting to remember itself. Page by page, the freighter accelerated into the black, engines thrumming a new rhythm, carrying echoes that refused to stay buried, and a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the dead could still speak. The freighter dropped out of warp near an industrial moon, scarred with smelters and slag rivers that glowed dull red even in the dark. Nova leaned forward, breath fogging the viewport as the cloning foundry filled the screen. Endless domes linked by cartilage catwalks, gestation pods stacked in neat blue rows like eggs in a hive. "Looks peaceful from up here," she murmured, fingers tightening on the armrest. Elias adjusted the approach vector, eyes on the traffic lanes thick with supply haulers. "Peaceful's the trick. Everyone inside wears a collar that thinks for them." He tapped the console, and the ship slid into a maintenance queue, transponder pinging as a routine ore shuttle. They docked at a side berth, airlock hissing open to the smell of warm nutrient and ozone. Workers shuffled past in identical gray jumpsuits, jean-locked collars glowing soft amber at their throats, steady pulses that matched the rhythm of the pods. Elias pulled a hood up, handed Nova a spare jumpsuit from the locker. She slipped it on, the fabric loose over her frame, and tucked her hair beneath the collar. "Feels like wearing someone else's skin," she said, tugging the sleeve. "Close enough," Elias replied, clipping a forged badge to her chest. "Keep your head down and walk like you belong." They moved with the flow, boots echoing on grated floors that vibrated with the low thrum of gestation cycles. Rows upon rows of pods glowed soft blue, each cradling a curled form. Citizens grown to spec, obedient from the first breath. Nova's step faltered beside one pod. Inside, a child's hand pressed against the membrane, fingers splayed as if reaching. She reached back without thinking, palm meeting the warm surface. The child's eyes opened. Blank, waiting. "They dream before they're born," she whispered, voice thick. Elias gently pulled her along. "Dreams get edited out later. Come on." A nutrient line snaked overhead, thick as a torso, pulsing with the day's batch. Elias palmed the memory bomb from his coat, small, matte black, no bigger than a ration cube. He knelt at a junction valve, unscrewed the access plate with quick twists. 30 seconds to spread, he muttered, sliding the device into the flow. The ink-black payload dissolved instant, racing through the system like warm dye in water. Alarms stayed silent. The bomb wasn't meant to explode, it was meant to remember. Workers froze mid-task along the line. A woman dropping vials let them shatter untouched. Eyes wide as fragments of a lullaby surfaced. Her mother's voice, never recorded, never allowed. A man at a console gripped the edge, knuckles white, recalling a father's laugh from a childhood the lattice had scrubbed clean. "They told us we volunteered," a foreman rasped, voice cracking like dry earth. He clawed at his collar, the amber light flickering to red, then ripped it free with a snarl. Sparks flew, the lock fried. Others followed, collars clattering to the floor in a growing chorus of metallic rain. Nova guided Elias up a service ladder to the catwalks of woven cartilage, flexible, warm, swaying slightly under their weight. Her skin left faint bioluminescent traces with each step, blooming like footprints only he could read. "This way, before the turrets wake up," she said, urgency creeping into her tone. Security nodes swiveled below, confused by the sudden revolt. Workers smashed control panels with bare fists, glass shattering, sparks arcing. Someone shouted a name no one should know, and the sound rippled outward like a wave. From the overseer's booth high above, a mid-level director watched the feeds in growing horror. Quotas collapsing, schedules in red. His hand hovered over the emergency purge, then fell. Quietly, deliberately, he deleted his own personnel file, credentials vanishing line by line. "Let it burn," he muttered to the empty booth, voice flat with sudden freedom. Elias and Nova reached the waste chute at the far end, a yawning tube slick with runoff. He boosted her up first. She caught his wrist and hauled him after. They slid down in a rush of warm air and dim light, landing in a heap inside a disposal shuttle already powering up for the slag fields. The foundry behind them lit the sky with the glow of reclaimed past, pods cracking open, workers stepping into lives they'd never been allowed to live. In the shuttle's cramped cabin, Nova leaned against Elias, her hand lingering on his wrist where the pulse matched her own. "They're remembering," she said, wonder softening the words. Elias keyed the launch sequence, the moon falling away beneath them. One foundry down, whole galaxy to go. The helix pattern on her skin mirrored his heartbeat now, steady and unafraid, as the shuttle arced toward the next shadow on their map. The shuttle skimmed Dine's equatorial ring, weaving through cargo haulers thick as clouds, until the white tower pierced the haze, a crystalline spire stabbing straight through the atmosphere, its facets catching starlight in cold, sharp glints. Elias throttled back, matching velocity with a maintenance convoy. "Core's up there, living lattice heartbeat and all." Nova pressed her forehead to the cool viewport, patterns on her skin shifting to a muted gray that blended with the tower's glow. "Feels like standing outside my own veins." He reached over, gave her knee a quick squeeze. Reassurance, not pity. "We're just tourists today." They latched on to a service gantry halfway up the spire, mag boots clamping with a satisfying clunk. Elias jacked a bypass into the lift controls. Doors slid open with a soft chime that sounded too polite for what they were doing. Inside, the walls pulsed faint and steady, billions of artificial cells sinking like a cosmic heart. The lift rose smooth, numbers climbing past restricted floors. Nova's reflection in the polished panel showed her tracing the shifting lines on her arm, eyes distant. "It's mapping me already." At the data core level, Elias ghosted the security feed with a loop of empty corridor. Hollow logs flickered to life around them, streams confirming the lattice-manipulated 2.3 trillion genomes in real time. Birth rates nudged, disease vectors tweaked, behavior curves flattened to perfect lines. He downloaded fragments to a slim drive, jaw tight. "They're not guiding evolution, they're scripting it." Nova's blood suddenly flared under her skin, projecting a holographic vein map that overlaid the tower schematics, threads leading down, deep beneath the northern pole, to a vault labeled only Helix Sanctum. She flexed her fingers. The map rotated, zooming. "That's where the original strand hides, the one that can talk back." A geneticist in a white coat rounded the corner. Froze, recognition flashing across his face. Elias's old colleague from the Institute days. The man's hand hovered over the alarm, then dropped. Instead, he tapped a panel. A nearby camera went dark. "Clock's ticking, boss. Don't waste it." He walked away without looking back. Nova's skin shifted again, patterns resolving into a topographic display. Ridges, pressures, ancient currents older than language itself. "Living GPS. My ancestors left the trail in me." Elias pocketed the drive, eyes on the schematics. Security drones swarmed the lower levels now, alerted by the camera blackout. He slapped a patch onto the nearest biosensor node, junk DNA flooding the system, spoofing 1,000 false positives. "That buys minutes, not hours. Move!" They sprinted for the emergency stairwell, boots pounding metal that vibrated with the tower's pulse. From the director's penthouse far above, the board watched intrusion alerts bloom like red flowers across their screens. One executive leaned back, fingers steepled. "Let them climb. The pole vault's a myth anyway." Another wasn't so sure, but the vote held: observe, contain, harvest. Nova paused on a landing, breath steady despite the climb. "I'm not just a survivor, Elias. I'm the core of renewal, built to reboot, or burn it all if the balance tips too far." Her hand found his, grip fierce. I don't want to be anyone's weapon. I want the choice. He met her gaze, the hum of the tower fading to background. Then we write a third option. Together. Drones breached the stairwell below. Ascent engines whining. Elias triggered a bulkhead seal, buying seconds. The map on Nova's skin pulsed brighter. North Pole, deep ice, sanctum waiting. They climbed on, 2 heartbeats syncing against the spire's indifferent thrum, the galaxy's next twist already forming in the space between their clasped hands. The stolen ice cutter submersible punched through Dine's frozen crust with a grinding roar that set every rivet humming like a struck bell. Elias gripped the yoke with both hands, knuckles pale against the worn leather, as the pressure gauges climbed past 1,200 atmospheres, numbers that would crumple a shuttle into foil. Outside the reinforced viewport, bioluminescent krill parted in slow curtains of electric blue, their bodies pulsing faint warnings in the absolute dark. Nova sat strapped in beside him, skin patterns dimmed to conserve every spark of energy, fading to faint silver scars that caught only the console's red emergency glow. She watched the depth counter spin, fingers twisting the harness strap across her chest until the fabric creased. "You ever done this before?" she asked, voice steady but the question hanging like frost in the cabin. Elias kept his eyes locked forward, nudging the dive angle a fraction shallower to ease the strain on the hull. "Once. Didn't like it much. Sub came back missing a fin and half its crew." He flashed a quick, crooked grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We'll do better." The sub scraped along an ancient Helian aqueduct, walls carved from petrified root, trunks twisted into arches older than any colony charter, etched with vein patterns that mirrored the ones now flickering across Nova's arms. Each grind of metal on stone sent a shudder through the deck plates, alarms pinged in frantic clusters, red icons blooming from microfractures, spiderwebbing the outer plating. Elias slapped the mute panel, silencing the chorus. "We're good, mostly. Keep breathing slow." Nova unstrapped with a soft click, moved to the sensor station on bare feet that left no sound on the cold grating. She placed a palm flat against the bulkhead. The vibrations eased, the scraping mellowing to a low, almost conversational hum, as if the sub itself recognized her touch. They dropped another 100 meters, water temperature climbing from bone-numbing cold to something almost blood-warm. Geothermal vents glowed ahead, orange ribbons threading the black. The change in pressure felt like a hand lifting from their chest. Elias exhaled, rolled his shoulders. "Pockets opening. Sanctum should be dead center." Nova nodded, eyes on the forward sonar. Ghost returns flickering where no structure should exist. She traced a fingertip across the screen. The return sharpened, resolving into the faint outline of a perfect sphere. The maintenance AI stirred from dormancy. An immense lattice of woven crystal and neural fiber, 30 meters across, suspended in the pocket like a moon in miniature. Its surface lit in slow, deliberate ripples, optics blooming open one by one until the entire sphere regarded them with ancient patience. A voice rolled through the cabin, toneless and vast, vibrating in their bones more than their ears. "Present the renewal signature, or be unmade." Nova closed her eyes. The cabin lights dimmed further, as if the sub itself held its breath. She didn't speak. Instead, she sang, soundless, a pulse of blood and memory. The patterns on her skin reignited in soft waves, syncing with the AI's glow until the two rhythms braided into one. The vault doors ahead, massive petals of alloy and crystal, irised open with a groan that loosened frost from the ceiling in glittering sheets. Vacuum yawned beyond, star-speckled and absolute. Elias killed the fans, letting inertia carry them across the threshold. The sub drifted into the sanctum proper, artificial gravity fading to null. He tethered himself to Nova's waist with a utility line, the carabiner clicking home. "Stay close. One wrong kick and we're pinballs." She answered with a small nod, already unstrapping midair, pushing off gently toward the chamber's heart. The original symmetrical strand floated there. 10 meters of perfect double helix filament, twisting slow in vacuum, its surface alive with fractal light that shifted through every color life had ever worn. Nova's reflection in the containment glass fractured across 1,000 facets, each showing her fear in a different angle. Eyes wide, lips parted, hand half raised as if to ward off a blow. Elias floated beside her, scanner extended, its beam trembling slightly in his grip. The device hummed, frequencies pouring in faster than it could log. Every sample he'd ever stolen, plus thousands more humming in harmonies he'd never dreamed. "It's singing," he whispered, voice thick with something close to awe. "The root code, unedited, unowned." Nova extended her hand, not touching, just close enough for the vacuum to hum between skin and strand. A single droplet of pure code beaded at the tip of her finger, liquid light, no larger than a tear, drawn forth like dew from a leaf. It hovered, trembling, then seeped into her skin with a soft flash that lit the chamber white for one heartbeat. She curled her fist around the warmth, eyes squeezing shut. "It knows me, knows what I could do." Elias reeled her back gently, the tether pulling taut between them. "We got it. Time to surface before company arrives." From orbit, Hellion trackers lit up like a firestorm, the sub's heat signature blooming sudden and bright against the pole's cold backdrop. Interceptors scrambled from the equatorial ring, engines igniting in tight formation, vectoring hard for the ice. "Intruders confirmed, lethal force authorized, engage on sight." The vault doors began cycling shut behind them, petals closing with ponderous grace. Elias fired the sub's emergency jets, compressed gas blasting them back into the aqueduct just as the first shockwave from an orbital strike rattled the ice above. Chunks of frozen root rained down, pinging off the hull. Nova braced against him, the droplets' warmth spreading through her veins like liquid sunrise. "It's awake now," she said, eyes distant, voice soft with wonder and dread. "And it knows my name, knows every name it ever gave." The sub rocketed upward through narrowing channels, hull creaking in protest, pursued by shadows closing fast and the distant thunder of interceptors breaching atmosphere. Elias pushed the throttle to the stop, the sanctum's secret burning bright in Nova's clenched fist, the galaxy's next breath waiting on whether they surfaced in time. The ice cutter burst from Dine's frozen crust in a towering geyser of vapor and shattered petrified root. Thrusters screaming blue fire as Elias yanked the yoke hard left to dodge the first interceptor lance. The beam carved a molten scar across the pole, superheated ice exploding outward in a white bloom that swallowed their tail and buffeted the sub like a leaf in a storm. Nova clung to the co-pilot harness with white-knuckled grip, the droplets glow pulsing frantic beneath her skin like a second heart trying to outrun the first. "Rings dead ahead. 3 minutes at full burn if we don't shake them," Elias barked, sweat beading on his brow and stinging his eyes. He flipped the sub to dorsal thrusters mid-climb, riding the shockwave upward in a gut-wrenching arc. The hull groaning under G-forces that pressed them deep into the seats until the padding felt like stone. Alarms howled in overlapping layers. Proximity, hull stress, incoming fire. Outside, the orbital ring resolved from a thin silver thread into a vast necklace of habitats, shipyards, and the throbbing core of the living lattice itself. Billions of artificial cells beating in perfect, terrible sync that Elias could almost feel through the controls. Gunships peeled from the docks in tight formation, sleek black needles accelerating with predatory grace, their lance arrays charging with a rising whine, audible even through vacuum on the open channel. Elias rolled the sub through a debris cloud of half-finished construction scrap, girders and plating tumbling slow in the low gravity, metal shards pinging off the hull like frantic hail. "They're herding us toward the core. Smart bastards." Nova's fingers flew over the auxiliary panel, rerouting power from life support to the makeshift shields with quick, precise taps. "Not smart enough. I can feel the lattice. It's confused, reaching for me like a hand in the dark." Her voice carried a tremor, but her eyes stayed locked on the tactical display, patterns on her arms flickering in sync with the core's distant pulse. They breached the ring's outer perimeter at full velocity, the sub shuddering as automated turrets tracked and fired warning bursts that stitched harmlessly past. Protocol holding for now. Elias weaved through traffic lanes thick with freighters diverting in panic, their running lights strobing red. "Clamp on my mark. 3, 2, 1. He slammed the docking thrusters, maglocks engaging the core habitat with a bone-jarring jolt that rattled teeth. The sub hung there, exposed, as Helion counter-antibodies flooded the local network. Nanoscale hunters designed to rewrite rogue DNA on contact, streaming from the lattice like a digital plague. Nova's veins blackened, sudden and sharp, the infection racing up her arms in fractal patterns that crawled toward her throat. She gasped, doubling forward against the harness, face paling as the code warred inside her. "It's burning the code! Trying to overwrite the droplet!" Elias ripped open the medkit with one hand, jacked a bioport into his own forearm, needle biting deep through skin and muscle, blood welling warm. "Sync with me! Now! Share the load!" He forced the merge without waiting, his genome streaming into hers through the port like a river crashing into the sea. Pain lanced through both, white-hot, shared, their helix strands braiding in the data overlay on the console screen, his steady archaeologist patterns weaving tight with her flaring renewal code, stabilizing the chaos. The counter-resonance bloomed outward from their link, a perfect counter-wave that rippled through the habitat and stuttered the lattice core. Billions of cells faltered, the massive heartbeat skipping once, twice, then finding a new rhythm. From a habitat window across the ring, a child pressed her small face to the glass, watching the core flicker like a dying star through the viewport. "Mommy, are the stars sick?" she asked, voice small and tinny over the open habitat intercom, her mother's hand tightening on her shoulder without an answer. Directorate gunships opened fire in earnest now, lances of coherent light stitching the void in deadly grids, debris from a shattered freighter spiraling into atmosphere as lethal, glowing snow. One beam grazed the sub's flank, shearing an antenna array in a shower of molten sparks that danced across the viewport. Elias hauled Nova through the airlock into the core chamber proper, the lattice throbbing around them like a living heart the size of a cathedral, walls of pulsing cells, veins of light carrying data in endless loops. He supported her weight as her legs buckled, the merge still draining them both. "Hold on, just a little longer." Nova's voice cracked over the open comm, strained but fierce, echoing in his helmet. She pressed both palms to the central node, fingers splaying wide. The merged resonance surged stronger, demanding consent protocols. Organism, environment, memory. All three voices required before any edit could pass. The lattice didn't collapse under the strain. It transformed, rewriting its own directives in real time. Triple locks snapping into place across 2.3 trillion genomes with audible chimes that vibrated through the deck. Workers in adjacent habitats paused at their stations, collars flickering as the new code propagated. Memories of the foundry revolt surfacing fresh, hands hovering over fire controls that now required their explicit say-so. Elias's vision tunneled to a pinpoint, blood flecking his teeth from bitten tongue or burst vessels, but he smiled through the haze. Evolution just asked permission, and it's waiting on the answer. Gunships closed the net tighter, formation leaders calling for a kill volley. But the ring's defenses hesitated, automated systems conflicting with the rewritten lattice, turrets swiveling indecisive. From a command bridge, a captain watched the core stabilize on his screens, voice low over fleet channel. "Hold fire, something's changing." The siege hung in fragile electric balance, the core's new rhythm pulsing outward like a question the galaxy had forgotten how to answer. Every heartbeat now a vote in the making. The lattice core steadied into a new cadence, 3 deliberate beats where there had been one relentless thrum, a quiet, unyielding insistence that no edit could pass without organism, environment, and memory all saying yes in harmony. The change rippled outward through the orbital ring like a long-held breath finally released, habitats dimming their defensive strobes, corridors filling with the soft glow of consenting pulses. Gunships held formation in the void, lance arrays cooling from white-hot to idle amber, pilots staring at tactical displays that now flashed triple-lock icons instead of fire orders. Elias eased Nova down to the deck plating, her weight light in the low gravity, the black fractal infection in her veins already receding to faint silver threads that matched the new rhythm. "It's listening now," she whispered, eyes half-lidded, a tired smile ghosting across her lips. Really listening, not just hearing. He supported her head with one hand, the other brushing damp hair from her forehead. The core chamber around them had transformed, no longer a cathedral of control, but a vast breathing archive, walls of pulsing cells now displaying scrolling consent logs in gentle blues and greens. Elias checked the bioport still linked between them. The merge held steady, his genome anchoring hers through the final integration. You did it. The third option. Nova's fingers found his wrist, squeezing once. Gratitude, exhaustion, something deeper. We did it. Couldn't hold the wave alone. Across the ring's interconnected habitats, the shift cascaded in quiet waves. Workers in the lower docks lifted hands from weapon controls, jean collars dimming from amber to soft white, then falling away like shed skins clattering to the grating. A dock foreman, face lined from years of shifts he couldn't remember enjoying, stared at his console as a memory surfaced unbidden. A sister he'd never been allowed to have, her laugh echoing in a childhood scrubbed clean. His hand hovered, then rerouted power from the gunship docks to life support with a few deliberate taps. Let them breathe, he muttered to no one, voice cracking on the words. Higher up in the executive spires where polished corridors reflected wealth in cold facets, board members scrambled into private yachts, engines spooling hot, personal guards hustling them aboard with clipped urgency. One director paused at the ramp, glancing back at the core's new glow, visible through the viewport. It's over. Burn the files. Most never cleared the ring. Their own security teams, newly unbound by the Accord's propagation, locked the bays with calm efficiency and opened comms to the independent fleets waiting beyond Dine's gravity well. Directorate vessels, stand down. New protocols in effect. Yachts powered down mid-launch, trapped in mag clamps that now required triple consent to release. Nova's knees buckled without warning. The helix sleep took her sudden and gentle, body folding into itself as the new code integrated cell by cell. Regeneration, not collapse. Alias caught her before she hit the deck, cradling her against his chest, her head lolling against his shoulder. I've got you. Easy now. He carried her through corridors now lit by soft, consenting pulses. No alarms, no pursuing boots, just the quiet thrum of a system learning the weight of permission. Crew members they passed nodded in silent acknowledgement, stepping aside with hands open, colleagues, not captors. The dropship waited in a civilian bay, prepped by ring staff who waved them through without scans. Elias piloted down through clear skies, the orbital ring above already broadcasting the Accord in every newborn genome. Independent planets acknowledging receipt with simple pulse bursts of light. The sea of luminescence spread below, a vast basin where plankton turned the water to scattered starlight. Waves lapping gentle at shores of dark sand. He set the ship down soft, engines winding to silence, and carried Nova out into the cool night air scented with salt and faint ozone. He laid her on the bioluminescent shore, waves lapping gentle at her boots, plankton swirling around her like curious fireflies that glowed brighter where her skin touched the sand. The sleep deepened, her breathing slowed to match the planet's own tides. Elias knelt beside her, pulling the transcription kit from his pack, crystal tablets, handheld stylus, a portable sequencer humming to life. He began the work, gene glyphs etched one careful line at a time, the library of free genes taking shape in shimmering code. Each tablet captured a fragment, Helian balance symbols, erased memories from Abyss 3. The Foundry workers' reclaimed names. History that can't be deleted again, he murmured, stylus scraping soft. A drifting news drone hovered overhead at a respectful distance, its reporter narrating in hushed awe as empires folded across the feeds. The directorate falls not to fire, but to memory. Planets from the core worlds to the rim are signing the Accord, encoded directly into the next generation. No fleets, no decrees, just cells remembering how to choose. The drone's light played across the water, turning the sea to a mirror of the sky. Nova's heartbeat steadied under his palm, strong and even. The planet itself seeming to exhale. Winds shifting from sharp gusts to gentle breezes, tides easing into new, unforced patterns. Stars above rearranged into subtle constellations, punctuation marks in a language older than words, as if the universe itself annotated the moment. Elias whispered to the night, voice rough from dust and wonder, and the long climb. We didn't win, we just stopped losing, and that's enough. The accord spread cell to cell, world to world, a treaty written in the only ink that couldn't be forged. Memory, consent, the quiet pulse of life allowed to speak for itself. Dawn crept over the sea of luminescence in slow, deliberate ribbons of rose and gold. The first true light washing across the water until the plankton dimmed from living stars to scattered embers. Nova stirred on the dark sand, skin patterns settling into calm silver waves that rippled only when the tide brushed her bare feet, each touch sending faint concentric glows outward like quiet applause. She opened her eyes to the soft hush of waves and Elias kneeling nearby, stylus still warm in his hand, the final gene glyph glowing fresh on the last crystal tablet. Perfect, complete, a period at the end of a sentence the galaxy had been waiting millennia to finish. How long was I gone? She asked, voice husky from the helix sleep, rough around the edges but steady underneath. Elias set the tablet aside with care, wiped sand from his palms onto his coat, and met her gaze. Long enough for the stars to shift a little, not long enough for regrets to settle in. He offered a hand. She took it, fingers intertwining as he pulled her upright. She stood slow, testing balance on legs that felt both familiar and brand new. Joints loose, muscles humming with the quiet energy of renewal rather than repair. The helix sleep had left her lighter, as if the accord had trimmed away every forcey to edit and left only what she chose to keep. Around them, the library of free genes lay complete in a neat protective arc, 100 crystal tablets humming soft in the dawn, each one a chapter. Helion balance symbols, the screaming forests of Abyss 3, the foundry workers' reclaimed names, the triple consent locks now pulsing in every newborn cell from here to the rim. Elias triggered the seed ship with a gentle tap, a sleek silver pod no larger than a coffin, its surface etched with the same silver waves that now graced Nova's skin. The tablets nested inside like seeds in a pod, compartments sealing with soft clicks. Anti-grav lifted it silent above the sand, hovering a moment as if reluctant to leave, then accelerated into the sky on a vector that would scatter copies across a dozen systems before vanishing among the stars. Adrift now, Elias said, watching the pod shrink to a glint. Anyone with a sequencer and a curious heart can read it. No gatekeepers. Nova followed his gaze, the wind tugging loose strands of hair across her face. She brushed them back. The motion simple, human. They'll argue over it, rewrite it, forget parts. Elias shrugged, the gesture easy. That's the point. Memory evolves too. She walked to the water's edge, bare feet sinking into wet sand that glowed briefly at each step. Waves lapped her ankles, plankton flaring bright in greeting, swirling around her like curious fireflies eager to map the new code in her blood. Nova crouched, dipped her fingers, and watched the light dance between them, living punctuation. When she straightened, the question came soft but inevitable, carried on the salt breeze. Do you regret being caught in this evolution? All the running, the merging, the almost dying? Elias joined her at the tide line, boots beside her bare feet, hands in his pockets as he considered the horizon where sea met sky in a seamless line. He turned to her, met her gaze with a tired, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and softened the lines the chase had etched there. If evolution means choosing our own path, then no, not 1 second. They stood in silence a moment, letting the waves speak. Overhead, the sky wrote new stories in light older than language. Constellations subtly redrawn by the accord's quiet hand. Familiar stars nudged into fresh alignments that would guide navigators for generations. From a distant colony light years away, wrapped in the warm dark of a birthing ward, a child drew her first breath, remembering the taste of rain on a world that never existed. Yet, the memory would color her first steps, spark her first questions, Fuel her first refusal to let anyone else script her growth. Somewhere else, an old geneticist on a forgotten moon would wake from a nap, find the library signal in his sequencer, and weep without knowing why. The helix accord spread not by force but by memory, cell to cell, heartbeat to heartbeat, a treaty written in the only ink that couldn't be forged, consent, choice, the quiet pulse of life allowed to speak for itself. Elias and Nova walked into the surf side by side, the water cool around their calves, then knees, then thighs. Their footprints glowed briefly in the wet sand behind them, two sets parallel, unhurried, before the tide smoothed them away with gentle insistence. The universe, for the first time in millennia, listened to its own pulse. Steady, unhurried, free to choose its next twist, the next breath, the next dawn.